Yeah, this is a very big question. There's no silver bullet, and there are very powerful forces that are working against this. I mean, once those forces realize that we'll all sink together, we might be able to make a change, but it might be too late. In the meantime, we have to do what we can. I mean, this community is a model. Increase in your encounters with other people. Model what we seek in the world with your own behavior. And ultimately, there was a stone walking on the path here that says, "Don't delay joy." So I'll just end this answer with a saying from the Prophet Muhammad on the end of time. And someone asked him, well, so there was I'm trying to remember how it was, how the tradition flows, but there was a person, who was planting a sapling in the ground, a tree. And the Prophet Muhammad said, plant it even if the day of judgment is tomorrow. Meaning you won't see the tree grow up, because then you're thinking in terms of outcomes. But that's not your job. Your job is your own life. These are all questions that are above my pay grade. We're all moving into this terrain together. You can certainly imagine that there will be lots of different ways in which AI functions. It's already there, and it's doing so many things to us with the algorithms, the things it shows us in our feed. So I'm not exactly sure how there will be different perhaps applications that will help people connect or perform certain rituals. I'll give an example. Just in COVID-19, the question came up in the Muslim community about ritual prayer at a distance. You're supposed to be in presence when you perform the ritual prayer in congregation. But Friday prayers were, this is really Jumu'ah. Friday is the day of congregation, and people aren't getting together. And so how do we fulfill that ritual? Is it okay to pray via Zoom? Right? And so these are new questions. There was actually a conference. I'm taking the question in a little bit different direction. But there was actually a conference on how ritual prayer will be performed by astronauts in space. I mean, you're supposed to face Mecca, and you're going around the Earth 21 times, and the sun keeps the time, and so you regulate things differently. And they've already thought about some of these things, when they think about life in the North Pole, for example, or in the northern areas where the sun just dips a little bit. So new things will come, but I think the really important thing for us to think about is how we will welcome these new technologies that are not being contained together. Because if we don't think carefully before they come in, they're going to control us before we know how to control them. Chautauqua. It should be everywhere. I mean, why can't we all live like this? It can't be that hard. I mean, fewer cars, people walking, learning. I mean, it's just incredible. I know it's a great privilege. It takes a lot to put a community like this together. But, I mean, this is a sign of hope. I hope it endures and flourishes. There are signs of hope. Not many. I'm trying to think. The one immediately in front of me was here. I mean, hope is something that you don't necessarily find empirically, like it's within you. And so if you're a person who is hopeful, and that's what religions can give us, right? They cultivate the inner life. Another thing the Pope says is, the outer deserts are a reflection of our inner deserts. And so if you cultivate an inner life, it cultivates hope. And every moment is a moment of glory. So from a Quranic point of view, God creates and destroys things all the time. New species come, old species go, and we could be one of those. So I'm going to die sooner or later. And I just have now, as do we all. And so that's something that I think can give us great hope, the moments that we have right now. Yeah, that's great. So actually, you know, the growth and shrinkage will vary depending on context. And so overall in the world, I mean, Islam is going to grow to the largest percentage in terms of population numbers, but nuns will grow most in the West, right? And so it depends on where you are. I think to avoid, I think the question you're asking, to avoid the tyranny of the majority, it has to be through encounter, through living together, and to working together. When we silo, and we get into, and this is what social media is doing as well, we just listen to ourselves and our close circle, you know, we can come up with outrageous suggestions on how we should live as a species, and we can do great harm to others. But if we're able to work in relationship, and that was modeled so beautifully yesterday here on this stage, it was remarkable. You know, if we can do that, and you see people, Pastor Baum's father, I mean, he changed in 5 minutes. He had a whole life of being formed and thinking one way, but a 5-minute encounter. And there are studies that show this, that people who have negative views of others are most likely have never met them. And if you've met the people about whom you have negative opinions, you have likely to have less bad opinions about them. And so what's really interesting about the modern world is we are becoming more global, more diverse, more spread out, but at the same time more insular. And because everyone's kind of looking down on their screens and they're getting these messages, I'm just going to extend this response, if I may. I was at a liberal arts conference at St. John's College in Santa Fe. My son went there. And there was a speaker who spoke about the idea of attention and the value of attention. And right now what we have is an attention-grabbing economy. You have advertisements everywhere, you're scrolling, and it's trying to keep your attention, because the longer you stay on the platform, the more you look at something, the more you stay at one channel, the more money they make. And this model, right, what keeps you tuned in is bringing out not our better angels, but the worst in us. And we're just looking at what's drawing our attention. They have really sophisticated ways of doing this rather than looking at each other. And he says, you know, he was doing this study, and then he was flying, so he was in a first-class lounge of Charles de Gaulle Airport. And he came out of the frenzy of the world. There are ads on the escalator, and he sits down in the first-class lounge, and the only sound you could hear was the spoon on the teacup. Because that was a place where there was enough privilege to say, you're not harvesting my mind. I'm going to be in my own world. And so we've created this world, and it's an incredible world, fascinating world, lots of good here, but we really need to think about what we're doing and scale it back. Same answer, encounter. Get out there into the world, and instead of staying closed in your own world, talk to other people. And we did this Madrasa Discourses project that Deborah mentioned earlier, where we engaged students of madrasas in India and Pakistan, and then later added Bangladesh. After I had left the project, I was there for the first 3 years, to advance scientific and theological literacy with those graduates. And a number of these questions on story and creation story and science, we worked out with that group. And what was really interesting is, like, even me, like, who has grown up in that environment, I was not prepared to encounter those madrasa students in the way that I did, because it wasn't the same world. They all had Facebook, they were taking selfies, and they were completely open to a different kind of conversation that their teachers were not. And if you don't open up the world for them, then they're going to, fall into those other bubbles, and we don't know what we're going to get. And so encounter is so important. And then, we involved some Notre Dame students to meet with these madrasa students, and they met in Nepal, and they met in Doha, Qatar, and it was absolutely incredible, the friendships they formed, despite the deep differences that were never resolved. But exactly like you saw with yesterday. We're like, no, but we love each other, and we will protect each other. And so encounter is so important. I don't know if we're having the right kinds of encounters. Yes, no, yeah, exactly. So it's contemporary Islams is how the academics would put it in their context. So it's of course it's not the same, right? But what the traditions do is they extend the argument, and that's how traditions operate. Is they find really interesting ways to maintain the continuity. And that's important, right? Because if you don't have that grounding, then according to those religions, what is there to adhere to? And so there are mechanisms that each tradition has. In Islam, for example, it's communities of interpreters, right? And in a more liberalized societies, it's really the individual interpreter and God. And so there's a Protestantization of Islam, if I can put it that way, whereas it was more of a Catholic type tradition without a pope, but with communities of interpreters that read arguments back through time and then extended them forward using coherent forms of reasoning. Now, one of the things that's happened, and this is what paradigm shifts, speak of, the way we think about the world has completely changed. And our picture of the world has completely changed. And I feel, I'll be careful in using the language of traditions catching up, right? But the frontiers of new knowledge, right? The things they're pushing us towards and drawing us towards. The traditions have not, at least, many of them have not within Islam or within other religions, have not adequately engaged them. And one of the reasons why they pull back is they're like, well, this is completely unravel everything. And what we did in madrasa discourses, for example, was we're like, well, you know what? Even earlier on, everything unraveled. Remember you encountered Aristotle and Plato and all this Hellenistic philosophy, and our whole theological tradition was kind of blindsided when they moved out into Baghdad and translated all these texts. And so that tradition you think is unchanging and impure is actually already inflected by Greek ideas. And so let it be inflected again. That's how God made us, right? But it feels scary, and we need courage. Know their story. Understand the problem that they're working with, and you'll see them differently. Because if you project your own problems and think that should be their problems, it's not a really healthy way of encounter. And this is why religious literacy is so important. We need to understand that people live in different worlds, and the worlds are not the same, even though we share the same spaces. And so to be able to empathize with another person means to be able to dive deeply, sincerely, and with integrity into their story.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mahan Mirza.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.